Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of the day it is that you're watching this. As you can see, we've got another guest with us today for the and Me series, and it's Scott Hastings. Everybody will know who Scott Hastings is. I don't really need to explain, but together with being an international rugby player of great success and TV commentator now, he's also the son of one of our past captains. I will say Mr. Hastings because he'll always be Mr. Hastings to me. But for everybody else, Clifford Hastings, who's a massively respected man at Buncefield. Unfortunately, he's not getting to play at the moment because he's a little bit under the weather, but hopefully we're back soon. So to get into Scott, thank you very much for coming and doing this. You've got 65 caps for Scotland at the time, was the highest caps ever. You had 2 Lions tours, 3 World Cups, captained the Barbarians, played in lots of sevens games. What was it like as a youngster with yourself and your brothers growing up? How did you get into it, and how were you supported by your parents when you were growing up?
Yeah, it was a great time of our lives. There was actually four boys in the Hastings family. There was Graham, the eldest, then Gavin, then myself, and Ewan was the youngest. And I suppose sport was always part and parcel of the Hastings household. And it didn't matter what time of year it was. There was a football out in the back garden. If Wimbledon came along, we'd have the tennis rackets out. Undoubtedly golf was part and parcel of that sporting experience. We also had, the rugby balls in the back garden. If there was a test series on, we'd get the old man's, mower out on the lawn. We'd paint wickets, and we'd play sport. And that was literally what we did. And family walks were inevitably with the dog in the Braid Hills. We're all about taking a football or a rugby ball and running off that boisterous energy. And I must say, you look back, and it was a happy household. And my father Clifford and mum, who parted a couple of years ago, Isabel, they were just fantastic parents to have around. They were encouraging without being pushy, and certainly I kind of learnt a lesson off them when my 2 started playing sport as well. And both Corey and Kerry Ann, my son and daughter, have played international sport, hockey. And my daughter at the moment, she's a fully fledged Scotland hockey internationalist. And it's lovely to see her embrace her sport just in the way that I embraced rugby. And it becomes all consuming. And, I was 21 when I was first capped for my country. So, those were special times. And Kerry Ann, at the moment, she's 23 and playing for her country in hockey. And it's wonderful to see. And of course, my nephew Adam is also playing and being part of the Scotland team. So, yeah, the dynasty's carrying on.
I was going to ask you that a little bit later on, but now that you've mentioned it, you will now be in a position as a parent where you'll be standing on the touchline watching somebody play an international sport. How does that make you feel, and how does that make you respect your parents when they were watching you playing?
Well, the beauty is that with my daughter and son playing hockey, I don't understand the rules, so I don't have a leg to stand on. But I must say, I take great pride in my wife Jenny and I. We travel around Europe, or have done over the last sort of 10 years. I've watched international competitions and visited places in Europe we would never have got to, and we've had such fun. And my mum and dad, looking back, they had fantastic times. They went out to, would you believe, 1987, they flew all the way to New Zealand to watch the first ever Rugby World Cup. And they had an absolute ball. And from then, they followed not only Scotland tours, but they went to World Cups in South Africa. They went back to New Zealand to watch the British Lions. Both Gavin and I played for the British Lions. And also, we ended up in Australia playing for the British Lions. And they were out there as well when my eldest brother, he lives out in Melbourne and has been out there for many years. And so that family connection was always really, really strong. And that's what continues to this day.
So going back to when you were younger, when did you start to realise that you had a bit of a talent for the sport? And when did you realise that it might actually become something more than just playing for fun?
Listen, it was nice and easy. My eldest brother, Graham, he started the trend at Watson's, and where he was always in the first 15. He gets selected for the Edinburgh schoolboy trials and the Scottish schools. My brother Gavin then would follow him down the similar path. So when I pitched up at these trials, and they were saying, "What's your name?" Scott Hastings, are you the brother of Graham and Gavin? Yes. Oh, you're in the team anyway. So it was kind of, the red carpet was laid out for me. No, it was, we were always competitive, I think, within the family. And as a result, that you drove your own standards and you practice. And, my father would tell a story, Clifford, years ago, where you go in and you kick the ball with your right foot, you come back and say, hey, Dad, look at this, I can kick the length of the garden with my right foot. He says, well, come back and tell me when you can do it with your left foot. So he was really good that way. Unfortunately, he didn't pass that message on in his golf to myself. I'm still struggling, hacking away as a handicap of 15. And I think he got down to sort of around about 2, I think, and had aspirations to be a professional golfer. But his father had a word with him and suppressed all that. So sport was always there. And rugby just became that all-consuming passion that I talked about earlier on. And, the fact was I was able, at the age of 21, a month after my 21st birthday, actually, to get capped for my country and stayed in the national team for 12 years. So it was very much part and parcel of my life. It was the number one in my life. And I suppose, the family came last in that order because there was business. I played a lot of my career as an amateur. So I was fairly well driven. And it's funny when sort of that cycle changes and you suddenly realize that family actually have to become your number one, and business sort of jumps over that. And I was developing a career in marketing and advertising, and the demands and the pressure of international sport, they grew every year. So in many respects, that discipline of continually practicing, continually pushing yourself remains to this day.
As you said there, you made your first Scotland cap, your international debut, at the same time your brother did, against France in 1986, I think it was. And looking back on the massive success, the 65 caps, the Lions tours, the Barbarians, the Sevens, the World Cups, everything like that. Looking back on that, what would be your proudest moment and what would be the highlight of your career if you were looking back right now?
As every young kid wants to play for the country, simple as that. And I was able to do that. But to do it with your brother as well was pretty special. And for the family, it was fantastic. And I suppose in some respects, we're sort of living that again with my nephew Adam, and Gavin's obviously very proud, and his wife Diane. And it's great that the Hastings name's back in there in the sporting headlights. But so looking back, your first cap is obviously really special. The British and Irish Lions was undoubtedly something, fantastic as well to experience. As an amateur, I always remember going in to see my boss in the advertising agency, and I said, Ron, I need some time off work. He says, where are you off to now? He says, I'm off to Australia. Why? Who are you going with? I'm going with the British Lions. Oh, congratulations. How long are you going for? I said, can I get 8 weeks off work, please? And, we managed to, get a solution. And off I went for 8 weeks. And that was magic, because that was when, as an amateur rugby player, you became a professional rugby player in those times. And that was a very special series. The Lions won that series 2-1. So I put that one and that experience right up there. But also your bread and butter is really important. And my club team, Watsonians, were my bread and butter. They were my passion. I played many seasons with them. But winning the Melrose Sevens in 1996 was undoubtedly just something that was utterly inspiring. I never thought I would win that, and that little medal means so much to me. And you can't buy that. You can't buy that experience. And now that seven-a-side rugby is now an Olympic sport, it's great that at the birthplace of the Sevens down in Melrose, the Green Yards, I was able to win one of those medals, and very few people get the opportunity. So yeah, first cap, playing for the Lions, and that Melrose Sevens medal was very special. But to do it also in the first two with Scotland and the British Lions, have Gavin alongside me was pretty special as well.
An amazing story and phenomenal career. And you retired from pro rugby in 1999. You carried on playing for a few years with Watsons until I think it was 2002. But once you retired, it's led you into where you are now with regards to your television work. You do a lot of commentary, you do the World Sevens, you do the ITV stuff and the World Cups. What got you into that, and how much do you enjoy doing the television work now?
Yeah, I got into broadcasting just shortly after I stopped playing. Actually, there was a call came into the office. Probably Gavin doesn't know this, so hopefully he doesn't hear this. But they were asking, ITV were on the phone, and they were asking for my brother Gavin. And I said, this is back in 1999. I said, oh, I'm sorry, he's busy during the Rugby World Cup, but this is his brother Scott. I've just stopped playing, but I'd be delighted to commentate on the Rugby World Cup. So the discussion happened, and since then I've done 6 Rugby World Cups with ITV. I developed into that, and I got a break through Scottish television, who started covering the club game, and it's something that I really enjoy doing. And undoubtedly, the Scottish dialect goes well in broadcasting. And I study. I'm a bit of an anorak. I put in the work and had the experience of working alongside Bill McLaren, that doyen of all sports commentators. And again, I suppose it goes back to that work ethic that undoubtedly that was instilled in me as a younger sibling, that I had to work hard for everything I did in my life, whether it be schoolwork, whether it be in the advertising agency, or whether it be on the sporting field. And I do a lot of research, and I do a lot of work, because if you go prepared, it's really important. And I always remember McLaren phoning me up just after I got a job with Scottish Television on the Rugby Roundup programme, which covered club rugby just back of 2000. And he says, now remember, Sonny, 90% of what you write down you'll never need, but make sure the 10%'s there. And those words still ring true today. And I have the ability to switch from what's called the play-by-play commentary, that's the lead commentator, to the analysis, the colour voice. So I'll still do a fair bit of prep if I'm in a colour voice. And the reason being is that although I'm reacting to what the viewer is watching, I need to kind of almost preempt and know what's going to happen. And if I can illustrate that to the viewer, that's really important to me. And, I've not, obviously with this situation now with COVID and the lockdown, there's just no sport. So suddenly my broadcasting has fallen off the edge of a cliff. So, but this last year I was out in Japan for the Rugby World Cup, and it was just fantastic to be involved in such a wonderful tournament. To be on the other side of the world, to be embraced for 7 weeks, following some of the greatest rugby players and greatest nations in the world. So it gives me a lot of pleasure, and probably it's the next best thing than playing.
Well, I have to say that I thoroughly enjoy your commentary, so a little pat on your back to yourself for that. So well done, it's great. Do you have, staying with the commentary, do you have a most memorable moment within your commentary career so far?
Oh, I've never been asked that question. I've had some incredible moments. I followed 7-a-side rugby all over. I think when you're standing and you're commentating on some of the best rugby players and best skilled rugby players in the world, it's really special. And I get excited about that. There was a marvellous try scored by Edinburgh's James Johnson, set up by Viliami Mata, when Edinburgh played Toulouse 2 years ago. And that one kind of hit the heights, because I'm very expressive in my commentary, and I get as much enjoyment out of seeing great tries. And that moment, was probably circled on YouTube, 100,000 views, and that was a good one. But Rugby World Cups, Commonwealth Games, and I think recently in Japan. From an emotional point of view, it was the Scotland-Japan game. Now, Scotland were knocked out at the group stages by the host union. And I don't know if your viewers will remember, but there was a lot of debate whether that game was going to go ahead because of the Typhoon Hagibis. We were in lockdown in Tokyo, actually, and there was a lot of debate as to whether that game was going ahead. Ultimately, it did. Japan played some scintillating rugby, and the atmosphere in the stadium was incredible. And Scotland almost made the comeback of all comebacks. They almost did it. But Japan, you couldn't begrudge Japan, because they'd beaten Ireland, they'd beaten Samoa, they'd beaten Scotland, and they qualified quite rightly for the quarterfinals. So for me, we put our microphones down at the end of the game. I was commentating with David Flatman, ex-England player, and also Nick Mullins. And we turned around and looked at each other, and we said, we just commentated on one of the most emotional games of rugby you could ever witness. And the atmosphere in that stadium was unbelievable. And even me telling you this story now, I've got tingles down my back thinking of that moment, because that was a piece of sporting history. And I was there commentating live over an audience of 14 million people, I believe. And it was just phenomenal.
It's interesting you say that, because I asked Rob Robertson the very same question about his journalism, and he said the atmosphere was quite hot, and it's one of his most memorable ever games.
You could literally, you could touch it, you could feel it. It was utterly staggering. And you know, when you ask that question, suddenly memories come up. And the other one was in 2018 when Scotland beat England at Murrayfield, but also that amazing game in 2019, which was the 38-all draw. And you know, Scotland were down 31 points to 7 at half time. In fact, 31-0 down with 5 minutes to go before half time. And I put my microphone down, turned to Lawrence Delalio alongside me and said, "This could be a 60-point drubbie." And it was the most phenomenal game of rugby, and the stories that surround people walking out bars, walking out of Twickenham and not watching the second half. And yet, what an amazing game of rugby, and the highest international scoring draw in international rugby, 30-all. That was another good one as well. So I suppose I could take up the rest of this podcast talking about all my commentary moments rather than my rugby moments.
Well, they are very, very interesting. I have to say they are very interesting. So that what I want to ask you now is that I was watching the Nine last night. I'm sure you know about it on BBC Scotland. But I'm friends with your wife on Facebook, and I've seen this for a period of time, and I see you're smiling there. Your
viewers might know what we're just about to chat about.
So you, predominantly your wife, and she's dragged you and your daughter into it at the moment, but you've been going out into the street and you've been doing exercises, trying to keep people in a positive mental attitude, keeping their frame of mind positive. You have done a lot of work for charity recently. You're quite passionate about it. It's quite close to your heart. How much satisfaction do you get out of the charity work you do, and how satisfying is it to see the difference that you can make?
Yeah, you know, I'm an ambassador of a number of charities. I'm a patron of Doddy Weir's charity. I'm a chairman of Doddy Weir's charity. My name's Doddy Foundation. I'm an ambassador for Ewan McDonald's Centre, also MND Scotland. But for Supporting Mind Scotland, it's a mental health charity, and you know, we all suffer at times from mental health. We have our struggles now. Mental health can also be anxiety, but for others, that mental health and lack of well-being leads to depression, and of course thoughts of suicide and the like. And having seen Jenny struggle with that at times over our marriage, it's hard to see somebody who's normally so outgoing suffering so badly. And at this period of lockdown, we live in a slightly elderly neighbourhood, shall we say, so we get all the oldies out, and we have had an absolute ball. And when we get people out dancing in the street and letting go of their inhibition, it really has helped their mental health, and also it provides good physical health. And I'm a bit of an outdoors person. I love my exercise. I love feeling vibrant. I love the sunshine. I love seeing spring, and I love taking pleasure from nature. So I'm a very positive individual, and I don't like negativity surrounding me. And some people can sometimes take that the wrong way, but at the same token, if I'm helping others, I think that really helps. And for Jenny, that's really important. And it's just nice to give back to the community sometimes. And it's not all about, you know, the paycheck at the end of the month or worrying about your finances, but putting a smile on somebody's face, being polite to somebody, saying please and thank you. It's so important that, you know, when we're under stress, that we realize that we can still help people and still, you know, make a contribution to society. And I suppose those are some of the values my mum and dad instilled upon all of us growing up, and that respect for people, the fact that we are allowed to say please and thank you and open doors for people, and just be courteous, because if you're courteous, you feel better for it. And our support with people who struggle at times is really important.
Well, it's you know, it's brilliant that you do that. I do a little bit of charity work as well. So, you know, we all need to continue to try and do as much as we can. And going back to what you said about your parents, I met your mum a number of occasions, and your dad is a great guy, and everything you say is just reflective of what he's like. So the body of the questions there, Scott, that was been absolutely brilliant. I've got a few more quick fires, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no worries.
Edinburgh or Glasgow?
Oh, Edinburgh, without any doubt. It's the most beautiful city in the world.
Absolutely. And rugby teams?
Edinburgh, I'm a former captain, so I'll back Edinburgh. But Glasgow's atmosphere at Scotstoun is really special, and they've played some exciting rugby over the last few years.
Brilliant. Who is your sporting hero? Not rugby, just in general.
Do you know, I think I look back to my golf, and I love and admire Jack Nicklaus, just for his competitiveness. I got to meet him a number of years ago, and just an absolute gentleman.
So back to rugby now. I want to ask you this. This is probably going to be the hardest question of the lot. Is who, in your opinion, is the greatest ever rugby player?
Gavin Hastings? No. Not at all. He doesn't get onto my top 10. The great thing is about being involved in international rugby. You meet some fantastic people, and people like Francois Pienaar, who lifted the Rugby World Cup for South Africa in 1995, was a very special man. I got some fantastic friends out there. But Jonah Lomo was a very special character. I played against him. I met him on a number of occasions, and every time he came to Edinburgh, he'd always phone up the Hastings boys, and we'd meet with him privately. And he was a very special man, and sadly passed. So I put him alongside the likes of Gareth Edwards, who's such an iconic figure, but undoubtedly Jonah Lomo. He was the guy who brought rugby into this modern era in 1995. He was an incredible athlete, an incredible rugby player, and an incredible man.
Scott Hastings, thank you very, very much for doing this. It's been great listening to you. I could listen for ages longer. I appreciate your time. Scott Hastings, rugby legend, all-round good guy. Thanks a lot. Hope everybody's enjoyed it, and I hope you take care and stay safe during this time, Scott.
And the next time I'm down on Bruntsfield, I apologise if I end up on somebody else's fairway, but that's because my father never really taught me the golf swing. He is the most magnificent slow golf swing. Mine's 100 miles an hour, but listen, I love the game. Hopefully we'll all get back onto the course, and I must say the improvements to Bruntsfield have been absolutely magnificent. So looking forward to playing it this summer.
Well, I look forward to you coming down and having a game with me sometime. So
Good
take
on
care.
you.
All right, bye-bye. Bye-bye.